Are you ready to unleash your full potential and become unstoppable in your success and leadership?
Welcome to the Unleashed and Unstoppable podcast, where we provide powerful insights and strategies for coaches, corporate leaders, and entrepreneurs. I'm Alexanne Carter.
And I'm Carol Register, and we're certified master neurocoaches who are passionate about helping you overcome your limiting beliefs and optimize your performance.
Each week, we'll be sharing actionable tips and strategies using neuroscience, from interviews with industry experts to solo episodes, to help you lead a life of power, purpose, and possibility on your own terms.
Join our community of like-minded individuals. Hit subscribe now, and let's be unleashed and unstoppable together.
Hey, wily ambitious leader. Welcome back to another episode of the Unleashed and Unstoppable podcast. Carol and I are so excited to have you here with us to dive into today's episode. I mean, this topic is so near and dear to my heart. It's why I do what I do. It's how the Irresistible Bold Leader came to fruition. And it is really why Carol and I are here. And we are always thinking about this particular topic every time, or before, I guess, we press record each and every Thursday. And before we dive in, we just want to remind you all that when you head on over to our show notes, we now have the capacity for you to send us a text message. And why this excites Carol and I so much is the fact that you can be in communication with us if there's a burning topic, a burning question that you have about neurohacking your success and your results, being able to learn more about identifying and neutralizing erasing old thought patterns that don't support and are in line with the vision that you're creating. We want to hear from you. So you want to head over to the show notes, you click send us a text message. And if you scroll on down, you will see that you're also able to grab my top productivity and neuro hacks for female leaders to help you gain back at least 2 hours of time in your day. And this will be so aligned and timely for this topic in this week's episode. And of course, being able to grab your free wealth activation mini course, which will also help you be able to really achieve that next level result without today's topic, burnout. Without burnout. This is something that Carol and I is so important to us. I mean, we experience this so much with our clients, right, Carol? Like experiencing burnout, not even realizing that they're succumbing to burnout, and it's like it's happening. Then because we have been in this work, we've both experienced burnout, we can now spot it from a mile away. We're noticing that our clients are getting closer to that point. And I know that happened to a client of yours recently, Carol. I mean, you also experienced a heart attack very recently as well. Yeah. And it's, one of our most recent episodes about the body keeps score, right? The body does really keep score. And so we want to just unpack that a little bit further today, when the body keeps score and then what happens related to burnout and the brain, so that you can see the signs and make some shifts and work with your brain to the success that you may create.
So good. Listen, The Body Keeps Score is also a fabulous book, and she really goes into neuroscience in that book. I recommend it. I don't have the author in front of me. I'll look that up here in a minute, make sure that we give that to you. And Alex Leanne, your expertise and leadership in this, based on your experience, what you've been through, and man, your ability to help us with productivity. So I don't know about you, but I definitely need help on a continual basis with managing my self-care and productivity, or at least that's what I thought. Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. There's not a difference. I had put up a barrier there that was actually non-existent. Have you done that too? Do you feel like I can only be productive if it looks like this? I can only rest and restore if it looks like this. What if it could be both and? What if it could be everything that you want it to be We dove into a previous episode on building a strong, healthy body about my heart attack and what I learned there and being the slow frog on the boil. But one of my clients this week had ended up in the hospital and was losing consciousness, and it was a really difficult situation. And the interesting thing was that I noticed the signs and had made suggestions, but it's easy to ignore those signs because our brain's saying, hey, this is what's familiar to you. This, even though it's faulty, and we know that, our brain's working to keep us in that familiar zone and protect that familiar zone because that is brain safety protecting this beautiful, amazing, sophisticated, automated system we have, right? However, it had faulty programming. And so there was faulty programming that led to a hospitalization. And thank goodness she's okay and she's doing well. She's got a clean bill of health. It's interesting too, because what she had been going through had been the things that we often go through when we're going through and when we're in this constant gotta go, gotta do.
Strive, like the do.
Right. It's the performance-based acceptance. And it's not creating from being, is it, Alex? It's creating from the mechanics of things. And so it's a familiar pattern. It's completely normal and reasonable that this pattern was protected, but the consequences were big because our subconsciouses are always absorbing and our bodies are absorbing and taking in the stress we're under. And we can really go deep into what happens when we're under chronic stress. A lot of what happened with my heart was due to what I thought I was dealing with in terms of my stress. Turns out there was a whole nother level. There was a whole level of not really leaning in to the situation that I was in and really healthy ways to deal with it that could take you and I beyond what the circumstances are, beyond what we're experiencing, beyond the situation, and really keep us in a state where we are healthy in the midst and where we are able to continue to believe that 51%, right, Alex? Make sure you check our episode with Jen Gottlieb on that. Go back and watch that episode. It's fabulous. And that you really are able to lean in to what you're going through, not ignoring it, not allowing it to shift back into your subconscious, not allowing it just to slip by you and sit back in there operating and running the show, right? Right.
Well, as you're talking, Carol, I always go back to the moment, and this moment was about a year before I experienced my burnout.
Yeah.
1 year before I experienced my burnout. And what was happening was I was actually Googling it because I could feel some of the symptoms, and I'd love for us to unpack that in a second. Like, how do we kind of define burnout and how can someone know, especially when they're not they're familiar with the symptoms because those are happening, but aren't really aware that it could be potential signs of burnout. And I don't know how many of my clients, it's when I started sharing my story and started talking about it and started working with them, looking at the NeuroPs, that they started having these aha moments of like, oh my goodness, this happened because I was burning out. This happened because I was feeling burnt out. But in terms of the word burnout, especially until very recently, that was not a term that we heard very often.
Yeah.
So here I was, right? 1 year earlier than actually to the point of like my body, right, shutting down on me, Googling, burnout, like understanding like what was, I think another term I looked up was like medical leave or stress leave, like those types of terms online. And in those moments, my internal dialogue, my internal thought was, I don't want to look weak.
Yeah.
If I ask for help or if I take a little bit of time off to help, you know, heal or get better or just like allow myself to rest,
Yes.
that I would look weak, that people would judge me, that people would criticize me, that I would be rejected, that I wouldn't look strong enough, that I wouldn't look like a good enough director, like that I couldn't do it all. And it was just this like internal competitor in me that was like, no, that's not an option. I'm going to do it all by myself. And I'm going to quote unquote fix myself by doing, right? By doing all these other things that, you know, it kind of talked about, right? Mindfulness and meditation. But I realized, again, I was doing it because it was a checkbox. But of course, it didn't really get to the source into that. It wasn't doing the inner work, and I didn't have support around me to support me in this process. It was still very lonely, right? We talked about lone wolf on previous episodes. It was very much about doing, thinking, if I do this, then I'm going to heal myself. Or if I do this, I'm not going to feel like this, or I'm going to overcome this. And through, of course, the work of neuroscience and learning and becoming a master certified neuro coach, and of course, all the work through leadership and everything that you and I have done over the last couple of years, Carol, I learned a few years down the road a whole different story about what was really going on and how I was attacking the symptoms versus the source.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would love to hear you lean into what was that turning point? How did you find out how to get out of symptom and into source? You know, it's just such a powerful thing. I'd love to hear that.
It was one morning while I was folding laundry as what I thought was sort of a meditative thing to do when I was off work. And then I heard our mentor, Dr. Shannon, on Hal Elrod's podcast. And she talked about how, 90 to 95% of our daily actions and decisions come from the subconscious. I listened to that podcast episode 2 times that day because I was also working with a therapist and learning about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I was learning a lot about internal dialogue and what was going on internally. And that's where I realized how, okay, wow, look at a year prior to burnout. My story was, I don't want to look weak, with this fear of not being accepted and liked and loved, which we both know now that's the 3 roots of our beliefs, which we also have an episode on that. And really getting connected with what was it in that moment, the tipping point of when I just went into like an uncontrollable sob for, I think it was like an hour or something, that it took me to like finally get myself together to drive myself home. That in that moment, it was the same thing. I was so afraid to look weak. I was so afraid to not have the answer. I was so afraid again to be rejected and not thought of, that I knew that my credibility was going to be in jeopardy. Like I just went back to those same moments of that internal conversation. That I realized that, okay, this is a whole different game that I get to. Well, I say game in terms of like, I get to go somewhere where I hadn't been before.
And wow, I love that, because when we're really going to make a change, it is going into the unknown. It is going into the unfamiliar. It's, there's what's that saying? Like, if there's a pattern you repeating and you're doing it over and over, isn't that the definition?
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Exactly. And it's so interesting to hear you touch on going back to, I think it's our episode number 2, that we teach that our limiting beliefs go back to 3 places. Am I loved and lovable? Am I worthy? And am I safe? And you're really touching on that probably at that stage when you'd heard that, completely unaware that you had this internal worth story and were looking for external validation.
Right.
And I grew up that way. You may have grown up that way as well. It's very common in our culture to receive these messages, especially from the ages of 0 to 8 years old, that your validation depends on others' approval. It's an external process. And so it's interesting here you talk about waking up and like really feeling the doubt of, what will I be judged? Am I considered a good leader? Am I going to be okay in this situation? I have to fix myself. I can't break down. This is not possible. So if you're there, if you've got these stories, I really want you to lean in, because truly the work that Alex has done and that I have done and that we're teaching can change this completely, right? And so you heard the podcast with Dr. Shannon Irvin and Hal Elrod. I happened to hear the same podcast, and we both had this really powerful connection piece here. And so then what did you do to start? And it is not that I mean to focus on the doing, but what did you change mentally that allowed you to take a new step in order to start doing the work that you do now?
Okay. So I always laugh at this question, right? I always laugh at the question, because you're right. What was it that you did? And yet it's so funny. So of course, like I realized, I mean, it wasn't even that moment. It took me a couple more days to realize, okay, I'm actually not well. And it was like when I couldn't even make a decision, when like I just couldn't make a decision. I was so afraid to make the wrong decision that I'm like, okay, there's clearly something, like I'm going to need some support with this. And it's funny because it was a question of doing, right? I was now seeing a therapist, and I asked my question, like, okay, so what she challenged me on was she wanted me to create, well, she really wanted me to do nothing, to be honest with you. She was like, I actually don't want you to do nothing. And so her not doing nothing, me, the doer, the high achiever, was like it was so uncomfortable. I'm like, what do you mean?
Like,
and she challenged me. Her challenge for me was to create white space in my day to engage myself in mindfulness activities. And the funny thing was, I think it was probably 6 months earlier, right? I actually purchased this little book of mindfulness activities. It was still sitting on my shelf. I hadn't even opened it up. But I also remember my automatic response, right? The doer who's used to doing was like, how much time? I needed to know how much time. And of course she laughed, because this is right. This is just such evidence of, again, how we're so programmed to do things that she's like, okay, clearly, right, it's uncomfortable with me to just being given the task of to do nothing, essentially. She said, I want you 20% of your day. 20% of your day. Like like the heart palpitating. What do you mean 20% of the day you want me to quote unquote do nothing? And I mean, she needed to define what mindfulness was. And it wasn't that mindfulness was just me sitting there, because the last thing I wanted to do in that moment was to be left with my thoughts. Because, I was at a level of such high stress. Now I was off work because the doctor's like, you're not exactly mentally stable, right? It's not the best environment, because, right, chronic stress, the brain is on complete alert. So talk about fight, flight, or freeze, right? Well, that's happening. So I needed to basically get myself to like a conscious, grounded state. And so one of the fastest,
you're in a conscious state of high stress, chronic stress that's not sustainable or meant to be, right?
I mean, the amount of different different neurochemical releases that are happening, right? Like when you're just on that like high alert, basically, right? You're on high alert. It's like getting your
survival brain.
You want to get back down to that sort of groundedness piece. Hence why the prescription, quote unquote, was to support with some of the mindfulness activities. And then to journal what was going on, because I was in such a reactive state, because my brain was on such high alert, was to start to learn and unpack and become intimate with what were some of the thoughts that were going on. And what
Yeah.
was really fascinating when that happened, and this is where we know, right? Like a thought combined with emotion creates the belief, is
Yeah.
that a lot of times I could feel the anxiety before I can understand what was happening.
Yeah. And you can feel it in your body first.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is, I think, a great time to even talk a little bit about like, how do you define burnout? And this
Mm.
is why we talked about the body keeps score, because the
Yeah.
body is going to communicate to you, and it could
Yeah.
be headaches, fatigue, exhaustion, and like hard, like I feel
I'm
like you're
so
having
glad
a
you're
heart
saying
attack.
this because this is what I was going to ask you next. Like, what are the symptoms? What should we be watching for?
Yeah, like I think
And
chronic
I'm looking up
pain.
the author of The
Oh,
Body Keeps Score for you guys right now.
so there's chronic pain, there's loss of appetite,
Mm.
overeating, maybe even binge eating, right? Because it feels good. You're
Yeah.
looking for um, that reprieve, right? Like looking for getting the dopamine, the feel good chemical, because you're not actually getting it when you're operating from such high stress.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, for me, it was the fatigue, the headaches. I had really bad shoulder and back pain. I went to physio for 2 years. 2 years. Can you
Oh.
imagine that? And then as soon as I was off, because I wasn't off work for 6 months, like recovering and getting better, during that 6 months, the pain eventually went away. And I
Mm.
realized in that
Wow.
moment that all the pain that was going on had nothing to do with like what I thought was some sort of shoulder injury.
Wow.
It was all related to stress.
So powerful, so powerful to, call this out and everything. And that's where, like, again, okay, I got the author for you guys. I was so excited on The Body Keeps Score, but it's so powerful to start to recognize. And the fact that you stepped into therapy, I just want to congratulate you for that. You started researching, you were aware. And what can happen easily is that we can be unaware or in denial, thinking that we've accepted this level of normalcy that is
Mm-hmm.
not normal and that is actually sabotaging our success. It's sabotaging what we're really meant for. And it's this constant trading time for money, trading what we think has to happen. I think it's hilarious that you would see hilarious in a positive way, that when you would see your therapist, you're like, wait, how much time is this going to take, because that you have had to use in some way this manner of operating for your survival,
Mm-hmm.
or at least what you thought you had to do for survival. And I remember in your earlier story, Alex Leanne, you were uprooted and put into a school in French when you were not fluent in French. And so I can only imagine that you begin to have to categorize and organize things in such a way to incorporate learning. So this was a method of getting through school, right? Would you touch on that?
Well, yeah, I actually walked into a new position. So still in the same school, but I had changed positions as well. And so also
Mm.
like learning, yeah, like learning a new role, a new position. There was a lot of that as well, like changes and things like that. So that also didn't sort of help the situation, right? Like it
Yeah.
kind of just like put more fire right onto like what was going on. And I want to share something, Carol, as you're touching on the therapist, and I have never shared this before.
Mm.
I had seen a therapist a few years prior, and I stopped going to her because I was afraid that she judged me.
Wow.
And so this is more evidence again
Yeah.
of our brain,
Yeah.
right? Kind of keeping us safe, or again, our brain what it goes back to the base of like wanting to be loved, wanted to be
Yeah.
accepted, wanted to feel safe and secure. So I walked in, I was proud of myself to go and seek some
Yeah.
therapy and, heal some of the things that I had, some past experiences and what I was going through. And I only saw the person, I think, 2 or 3 times. And I just, right, it's so important that we feel safe and secure. And
Yes.
so there's something about I don't know what happened, but there was just something that, spidey senses went up and it was like, I don't feel safe and secure. Then I went automatically to, I feel judged and I didn't want to go back here. And it's that automatic base of like, I can do this on my own. I don't need anybody to help me. And
feeling in control of your situation, but rather than really truly being in control, that's where the survival brain wants us to be controlling. And, I catch myself in that. Okay, where do I have to be over analyzing or making decisions or, thinking through everything and then just going, no, it's okay. So I think this is really so powerful that you are bringing this out and bringing out, to me, our worst critic is our inner critic. So if you're feeling that she's judging you, who's really judging you? Who is your worst judge, right, in this situation? I do think, though, I do want to address what you said about spidey sense. We do have a heart, brain, spirit connection. We are integrated beings. We are energy. We are energy or spirit, however you prefer to liken it. And I do believe that our intuitions are very intelligent. So how would you describe being able to trust yourself with the therapist you're with, as well as know that, where that judgment or feeling judged was coming from?
Yeah, I think that is a great question, Carol. You're thinking that. I was kind of thinking through that myself as well, like trying to think the difference between, like, say today, being able to trust my intuition because I'm very grounded and I'm very confident in myself, versus back then I was operating from such a place of insecurity. It's almost difficult to like, I guess you could say, trust the intuition. And it was operating from more of a place of victim and just insecurity versus a place of like, I'm confident, I'm grounded, and this doesn't feel right, versus that fear. So even in that moment, there was still a high level of chronic stress. And so I was coming from a place of that insecurity judgment place when I like think back to it and kind of wonder, like, I did question, like, okay, I was seeing somebody. So what happened? Like, how come I stopped going? Obviously, as I've healed and gone through leadership and done so much work on myself, I reflected back on that moment because I was like, I was seeing someone. So what happened? And it was just, I felt very judged by the person. And I don't like, in hindsight, I don't think the person was judging me. And in hindsight, had I had stayed and had I had worked through and all that, like, the trajectory could have been different. But I was very judgmental. I wasn't, I guess, you're right. You said it, Carol. I was judging myself, thinking again, I wasn't strong enough. I needed help. Right. And there's just that's the thing that Carol and I noticed with our clients, with high achievers. This is a lot of, especially as women leaders, right? There is a lot of that, that external pressure to do it all, to be it all, to prove to people, especially, if you did have a certain upbringing, that you did have that, I don't say the drive, but that drive to succeed, right? When you see that. And so that becomes innately part of you to drive, to strive, to succeed, to overcome, because you feel so good to overcome things. And, we even talked on another episode, and we recorded last week, about the community piece, right? About being part of a tribe, about being part of that community, about not needing to go about it alone. When you don't know any other way, right? Like, I grew up with a single mom and all our family is overseas, right? And, when you're so used to just seeing like an independent, strong, powerful woman, that's what you see. You grow up to be a strong, independent woman. That's what you believe. That's how it has to be. And to learn, obviously, the last couple of years, that it doesn't have to be like that. Right.
Yeah.
It's more powerful when you're surrounded by more powerful people to lift you up and to do it together. But to
Mm.
break that, right? Like, and that's what I realized, like, just in that hindsight reflection, is like, that was what kept coming up to me. That's what led to the burnout, right? It was me doing it all by myself,
And doing
not
it.
asking for help.
You know, it is one of the hardest things to ask for help. And I think it's super important to address that, because what happens is we feel vulnerable when we
Mhm.
ask for help. And,
Yeah.
and then over here, we may have a story. I have the story, you have the story. And if you listener have the story, if you friend, I'm sending you so much love. If you have the story of perfectionism, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So looking at starting to do this work and define things for ourselves is so powerful. For me, beginning to define the difference between excellence, being able to do it messy, and the old story of it has to be perfect. Well,
Yeah.
let me ask you, is perfect possible? Tell me where perfect exists. Now, high standards exist. I'm super happy to get into a jet with a very qualified pilot, or, I would like to have a qualified surgeon when I go into surgery. With this recent heart procedure I had, I was very happy for the expertise of the individual who was performing this. And is does perfection exist anywhere? Is it about that? Is that what is meant on our life journey? And I know these are big questions, they're philosophical, but this is what Alex, Leanne, and I do in guiding you through being able to ask yourself the questions, define things for yourself, so that you can begin to walk forward in this life in a way that brings you the love, the joy, the peace, the alignment that you really desire, and living that full life, because you matter and your dreams matter so much. And, this ride of being even able, I will say, to be a high achiever. To me, I consider it a privilege, right?
Mhm.
But the power of it is just going back again, we do not have to do this alone. And if you look at the top companies out there, I'd love to go look at the stats, Alex. Stats are my thing. I would really love to go see, you know, if there is somewhat of a distinction depending on certain parameters, certain level of success of the collective, because almost every big company I can think of has been a collective. Like Facebook is not Mark Zuckerberg, it is a collective. Google is a collective. And I was looking at one of the really high achievers last night, 30 billion. And, it doesn't happen alone. And that's the power, right? So being able to put yourself in community, be vulnerable, be excited about connecting with people. And I just want to go back, Alex, to what you've reiterated, defining what this burnout looked like, what getting out of it looked like, what you were able to do to take the action based on what you decided for your life. And it's always based on belief. It always goes back to
Oh,
being,
yeah. I
you
mean,
know.
even I'll be honest with you, it still took me maybe 2 years from
Mm,
that moment to
yeah.
actually really be honest about what really had happened. Like
Mm, yeah.
I would share a little bit here and there, but to really unpack the layers and really be
Yeah.
honest. And it was funny because even Abby was 10 months old, and I started business. Right. I basically started business and gave birth to a baby at the same time. And she was 10 months old. And I realized in that moment I was doing it again, right? Like I'd found
Mm,
myself in those same patterns because that's what my brain was used to.
Yeah.
And just realizing that. And so that's why I know like it did take, some good time to really acknowledge that, recognize that.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to share, because this is something that really supported me, is that, it's not that you can't do it. And I was always operating that I need to prove myself. But
Yeah.
once I had the shift of like, I can do this, but
Yeah.
I'm choosing not to go at it alone.
Mm.
And that's been a constant stretch. It was even when I was in the leadership room recently. I mean, that was the big stretch for me. And I continue to get coaching and support around like, okay, where do you get to go to ask for support? Because it wasn't about, of course I can do it on my own. You can do it on your own. We can all, we actually can, right? Especially if you're a high achiever, you can, but you don't have to. And the
Yeah.
moment you give yourself permission that I don't have to do this, and honestly, frankly, it got to a point, like, honestly, now I don't want to do it alone. I want to
Yeah.
do it with people because it's more fun. It makes things easier and lighter,
Yeah.
means that you like, even for Carol and I, right? We get to stay in our zone of genius. We get to do the things that light us up. Life becomes more enjoyable and it creates more time and more space to really do the things that I love to do. And now, instead of just saying yes to everything, because Carol, so I don't remember if you said this earlier, well, maybe this is on our other podcast episodes listened to about like, like saying yes and learning to sort of say no, because when we're saying no to things, it allows us to say yes to others. And when we
Yeah.
say yes to things, it means that we're saying no to other things. So just like really operating from that kind of place,
Yeah.
when you're so clear on what's important to you, right? What your values are, really how you want to be spending your time, who you want to be spending your time with, that really impacts everything. And you're right, Carol, like the most successful people out there are not the ones that went about it alone. It's just,
Mhm.
it's right. It's just, what is that expression? You go far alone, but you go further as a team. I don't know. Okay. That's
Yeah.
not,
Yeah. I remember it's like an
or,
African proverb. Yeah.
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 Oh
It's,
yeah, you go far alone, but you go further and faster together, or something like that,
yeah,
right?
that's right.
And it's true, right? I did not believe that several years ago, but
Mhm.
ever since then, and doing the work and reprogramming and being open and looking at other ways and being curious, I mean, now, right, our brain is going to look for evidence that are in line with some of the questions that you ask, right? And
Yeah.
so for the longest
Yeah.
time, I was always looking for evidence to prove that I was good enough to do it by myself. And
Yeah.
now the focus is, okay, who do I get to work with? How do I get to work in collaboration?
Yeah.
How does this get to be easy? And so since I shifted the question of like, how does it get to be easy? My brain is constantly looking for ways that this gets to be easy and this gets to be fun. And
Yes.
it's so that's just
Mm.
this, the power of questions as well, right?
Yeah.
That really
And
goes into a lot of this.
for me, I go back a lot to the what if, but not from, often what I had found my brain doing was, what if things go wrong? What if this happens? What if that happens? Instead, turning that around and going, what if it goes right? What if it's easy?
Yeah.
What if there are amazing people? And even in the moment, I've had situations where I felt like somebody's energy or resistance. And I know that from the leadership work that we've done, and you can do this too. We really want to take you through this because it's so powerful to be able to step back and get curious and go, what if they're really working for me? Like, even if they don't know it, what if they're really, everything that's happening is happening for me? And I have found instant shifts in that have been absolutely amazing, literally mind-boggling, even doing the work that we do, because, not knowing that power. What are you doing right now to stay in the journey and to help your clients with this?
For me, I mean, we had Jen here on the episode a few weeks ago, and that breath work has been a
Jen
complete
Broyles.
yeah. Oh, we
Yeah.
had Jen
Shout
Broyles
out.
on here a
Yeah.
few weeks ago, and when women, I've been speaking quite a lot lately to different women who, are saying like, I'm experiencing anxiety and this is coming
Yeah.
up. My first point is, and Jen even did a recording on the podcast, a worthiness exercise, and all her links are on that episode as well. So the breath work, right? Come back down to the mindfulness activities, right? The breath work. but it's really like, it's not just sitting there listening to a meditation. Like it's really like you're really connected
Yeah.
and just really getting grounded in that breath work. So that has been huge. And creating time to play. Like one of my
Yeah,
intention is
I
every
love
day is to
that.
laugh with the girls, right? Because
Yeah.
laughter is the best medicine. And so that is something that, you know, being creative of creating that space that we love to sing and dance. So like just creating that space and being super intentional that,
So
you know,
good.
that the girls and I
Yeah.
laugh or sing or something every day and just being really intentional with that piece.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, and this has always been something, even from the get-go, even before burnout, but changing the intention is
Hmm.
having that like family activity time. So like usually on a
Yeah.
Saturday is like our family adventure day.
I
And
love that.
since Andrew and I together, it was always that. But what
Mm.
shifted was that before it was like, we're gonna do this, and it was like a checkbox. And
Yeah.
now, and I would go on it and I wouldn't be present and I wouldn't be connected. So now the intention is
Mm.
shifted, whereas like creating present, connected time as a family.
Wow. That's
And
powerful right there. Just pause for a second on that. Like anytime along our paths, we can make these little subtle shifts
Mhm.
while we're doing the work. And those intentions and declarations, so incredibly powerful, right? And so I just wanted to pause right there really quick.
Well, and that's the thing, right? In theory, on the calendar, it's the same, like it's, you know, adventure day, but the intention is completely shifted. And I remember like operating like, you know, again, a little bit of anxiety of like, okay, what are we doing? Da, 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 da. And it's like, okay, how do we get to have fun today? How are we going to be
Yeah.
present and connected? And then really setting yourself up for that. Because if you've
Yeah.
got something that's like outstanding, you know, like take the time to close the loop on a task so that you
Mhm.
can show up present and connected. Because that's the last thing that you want is to show up and then not actually be fully present because all you're
Yeah.
thinking about is the thing that you still have to do. And so even that building that muscle, right? Asking, like not saying asking for permission, but what I meant by that is like is communication,
Yeah.
right? Of saying, you know what, I can't wait to do XYZ. Can I have 30 minutes before we go so I can just wrap this task up so that now I can go and be fully present and connected,
Mm.
right? And it's again, it's
Simple.
asking for help,
Yeah.
right? Asking for support. In my case,
Yeah.
because we have two littles, right? So that involves
Mm.
having my husband watch the girls to give me that 30 minutes. So it's that would be the other thing too, Carol. Is that question of
Yeah.
what does support look like? How can I get support here? And
Mm.
that I would say that since I had my word simplicity as my word of the year, and that was last year, that
Yeah.
has surely made a massive game changer for me now
So
because our
powerful.
brain, right? Our brains like to overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
And so being grounded in how does this, what does this look like to be simple? How can this be simple? We can start just asking ourselves that question.
Mm.
We can step into simplicity.
I think that's so amazing. And listener, as we start to wrap up here, I really want to share with you some of, recapping these things that Alex Leanne has said. Define things for yourself. Start to have an awareness, right? Pay attention to some of the symptoms that she mentioned, that she started to recognize. And that awareness piece in terms of the neuroscience is really huge. And I would invite you to share your burnout stories with us. You can text us right now, as we mentioned earlier. It's right in the beginning of the show notes. Share with us your burnout stories or DM us on Instagram about what you've gone through, what you're going through, what you have overcome, your strategies. We would love to hear them because, as a collective, as a collaboration, as a group, we are all connected. And when we step into being a positive and powerful support for one another, man, does the whole world start to change. It's a ripple effect in terms of the quantum world and in terms of our brain science, right? Anything else you want to add as a call to action for our friends today, Alex Leanne?
Yeah, so if you haven't checked out Jen Broyles' episode on breathwork a few weeks ago, I really invite you to do so, unless you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Because breathwork is not good for those who are pregnant. So I just want to put that out there because I was having a conversation recently and
I didn't know that.
Oh, wait a second. Yeah, it's not recommended if you're pregnant to do breathwork. However, I still recommend taking a listen to the episode for all the other, information that Jen talks about and leans into about breathwork and
resetting the nervous system.
Yeah. I think that the underlining action step there, whether it's breath work or it's anything, just create 10 minutes for yourself in your day.
Yeah.
10 minutes. And it goes back to that mindfulness piece, right? Create 10 minutes for yourself. Could be to do some coloring. It even could be to just wash your face.
Yeah.
Enjoy that cup of coffee. It could be a workout. It could be a walk. It could just be sitting there, staring out the window and enjoying the view. But just to provide yourself with that, that reprieve, that vacation, that time to just be, it really can make a massive difference. And I acknowledge how at the beginning can be very uncomfortable, but I'll be honest with you, I love those moments now. Like I look forward to those moments. Those are the moments that I create and I'm committed to creating in my day, which previously would probably have been the last thing on my mind, right? When you've got your massive to-do list, and now that is the first thing that I lean in to create, because you do set yourself up for success. You do get quite enough to be in alignment with what's important to you, right? Going back to your values. And it's that power of the pause that creates space to look at, how could this look differently? How does this get differently? Right? You find so many answers in that space, right? Like, even if it's just giving yourself a few extra minutes in the shower, right? Like, I don't know how many people I got in the shower, like it's just that it's finding a way to slow things down.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. And that's why I say 10 minutes. If you can't do 10, then do 5, but just, that is my invitation, whichever way you look at it, to just create that for yourself.
We're super excited to continue to bring you the neuroscience, and, be sure and go listen to that episode with Jen Broyles. We have 2 Jens. I mentioned Jen Gottlieb earlier in the show. I want to invite you again to go download our free gifts. Alex Leanne's is specific to productivity and burnout. This is going to be very valuable for you today. And I especially would love for you to join us in a community. So we have the Productivity and Wealth Secrets of High Performing Leaders. This is our Unleashed and Unstoppable Facebook group. I can't spit it all out. We would love to invite you in and be a part of a burnout support group. And we have that for you. Alex Leanne and I have that for you. Jump in with us. We'd love to hear from you. You don't have to do it alone. We're here for you. We love you. You matter. And we can't wait to bring you more. So we'll see you next week. Ciao.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
This episode of Unleashed and Unstoppable is brought to you by Easy Way Network.
If you want to amplify your reach, visibility, and generate more sales leads, joint venture partners, and increase your bottom line by one simple login, then Easy Way Network is your solution to greatness. Our all-in-one marketing solutions hub can help boost your event, podcast, and increase your relationship equity by the click of a button. What are you waiting for? EasyWayNetwork.com.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Unleashed Unstoppable podcast with your hosts, Alexandra Carter and Carol Register.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review, and subscribe.
That's all for this episode, Wildly Ambitious Leaders. See you next week.